So they had Cal or Gel Nordstrom on here, the globalization guru, or I might suggest the um, globalization. That's what I'm looking for here. I can't find the word I'm looking for. Happens far too often. It's kind of a shame. Um, Quack? Can we use the word quack? What he's selling may not be well thought out. I'll acknowledge I haven't read his books directly, but these ideas float around all over the place enough that you don't really have to have read the text directly to get the idea. And I think that the ideas have been demonstrated to be completely wrong. Oksana here tends to play the devil's advocate, whether she's saying what she really thinks or not is never really clear. But she certainly correct to challenge him on this idea that economic integration leads to an end of warfare. And she's quite correct to point to the Ukraine as an example. I actually remember watching news reports. Again, this video was recorded in late 2014. I remember watching videos, 2000, I guess it was in late 2013 and early 2014. That, and these were, people that identified as leftist academics, making the argument that what's happening in Ukraine can't be happening because it contradicts the theories of globalization, and that it's all gonna gloss over. There cannot be long-term consequences. And what the argument that Nordstrom makes here, is that free trade is so beneficial that nobody will ever prevent it. That it's irrational to fight against free trade. Well, that's such a nest of poorly constructed ideas, right? So a conflict between Germany and Russia is impossible because free trade that exists, and economic integration is too beneficial, and people will not allow it to happen. People will reject it, right? They'll fight it. They'll rise up and they'll kill the generals on their own sides, right? If you try to enforce a conflict, what you'll get is a revolution, right? Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to challenge the premise. Is there free trade between Germany and Russia? Well, there may be economic integration, quote unquote, but it certainly isn't free trade. There's all kinds of tariffs, hidden tariffs, taxes, systemic laws designed to, place one type of producer over another. The idea that there's anything resembling free trade really anywhere in the world at the moment is ridiculous. What there are corporate signed agreements that put certain groups at a privileged advantage over others. So when you begin with this premise that we have free trade in the first place, and then you try to draw conclusions from it, whether your conclusions are right or not doesn't matter, because your premise is false, right? So let's begin with that for the start. Okay. Would I agree that that a free trade agreement between Russia and Germany would, or Russia and Europe would, eliminate the potential of all possible conflict? Would I agree with that? Um, and I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to construct a straw man, right? I'm maybe being a little bit, I may be exaggerating the point a little bit, right? But would it substantially reduce? I think it probably would substantially reduce it. Maybe not as much as people would suggest, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But that's not what we have here, right? What we have instead are agreements that give privileges to certain interests that are seen as preferable to the different states. So we have these agreements. These agreements might, put a tariff on this industry, whereas there's, supply management on that industry. I mean, you're talking about Europe and Russia. There's supply management all over Europe, and there's supply management all over Russia. You're talking about free trade. It's ridiculous, right? And so you really have to reduce a lot of his argument to propaganda. And that's really literally all it is. It is straight up, balls out, flat out, totally fucking propaganda. But a lot of leftists take it seriously and buy right into it, right? And the reason is because the projections are so much in line with what they want, right? So, we want harmony, we want peace, so you give us this idea and then you tell us it'll get us there. We say, all right. But in the process, you have to abolish your entire reference frames of thought, right? You have to adopt concepts like class harmony, which are broadly considered impossible within any kind of coherent left-wing worldview, right? Rather, if you look at what these agreements actually do, which is set up privileged groups and set up hierarchies and set up exclusive corridors of power, then conflict is the logical ramification of it. And if you look at the world order, where you have these collusions between powerful corporate interests, powerful banking interests, you end up with, whether you want to call them, oligarchs in Russia or just aristocrats in the United States. These complexes and structures where you have big money and big influence from big money, that system is a system that's designed for conflict. So the idea that the economic order that was constructed over the last 50 years was designed for peace is ridiculous on its face. In order to get to that conclusion, you have to misunderstand the agreements and then take that misunderstanding of the agreements and project it out forwards, right? If you look at what the actual agreements actually say, and you analyze them using evidence, and then you can, make those sorts of deductions from an actually rooted, position, you don't come to those conclusions. You come to the conclusions that that the New World Order is not designed to foster peace and order, but designed to foster conflict and chaos. And lo and behold, what do we have? We have conflict and chaos. Surprise, right? The world was designed to create conflict, and we have conflict. But there's an even more fundamental point, okay? Even if we agree that we can have free trade, even in an imaginary world that does not exist, where we actually had free trade, which means that you have actual free markets, you have states don't get in the way, so you don't have supply management, okay, you don't have corporate subsidies, you don't have tariffs, you don't have any of that kind of stuff, right? It doesn't take away the fact that people have economic incentives to fund conflict. So they talked a little bit about the mobile phone being more powerful than the Kalashnikov. Okay, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I don't really want to get into the debate. I just want to point out that somebody makes Kalashnikovs and they want to ensure that they're able to sell them. They want there to be a market for their product. And you can have all the economic integration in the world. I mean, I suppose the economic that would imply that Russian and German arms companies should work together. It's a trade, or are they competing over the market? I suppose there would be a little bit of that there too, right? No. Okay, so in a truly free trade zone, you would have German and Russian arms manufacturers competing for the market. Does that sound like it's producing peace? Okay, but let's remember again that that's not what we have. Instead, what we have is a system where money buys influence, money buys power, and weapons manufacturers have lots of money. So integration or not, free trade or not, our elected political representatives are still in the business of opening up markets for their campaign contributors, which are arms manufacturers. I get the theory, okay? The idea is that so much of the conflict in the world that we have today, or let me rephrase that, so much of the conflict in the world that they had in the 19th century was about empires fighting over markets and trade wars, right? So you had the different colonial powers fighting over access to China, and fighting with China over access to China, right? You had the Spanish and the Portuguese fighting over access to gold in South America, right? And if instead of having these exclusive zones for empires, to take over and exploit, if you had openly free trade, then you would take away the narrative of the nation state controlling resources and markets, right? Okay, but none of that does anything to address the war market itself, right? Or the nationalistic needs of resource scarcity, right? So you talk about oil scarcity, for example. We're maybe not there exactly, but we're all projections suggest that we're moving into a near future of extreme oil scarcity. how does free trade, eliminate conflict over scarcity? You've still got the guys with the biggest guns that are going to want control over the resource because it's scarce. And again, how do you? I suppose you could argue that a free market would make it. If countries are at war with each other, then they could trade, weapons across enemy lines. But such an arrangement would only fuel the conflict further, right? So I think that's one of the biggest reasons that we're seeing what we're seeing, right? In Ukraine especially. So again, it's a fantasy to begin with because there isn't free trade. Okay, but if there was, then it would only address a small amount, of the things that could potentially lead to conflict. It's not powerful enough to abolish war. And if you want to build a new world order, where conflict is impossible, I would advise you not to try to create a market system to do it with. Although, of course, as I mentioned, I think that it's absolutely apparent and completely obvious that this system was not designed for peace but for war. Because there are people that profit from war. So what's the answer then? I think you know the answer. If we have people that profit from war, making it difficult to eliminate war, well then we need to eliminate the profit, right? Ah.